My parents always favored my brother, and at his wedding I was humiliated with a napkin on my chair and my gift was mocked, but what happened after that no one in my family expected. My name's Evan and I'm 31 years old. I don't consider myself flashy or the kind of guy who demands attention. I've always been the type to show up, help where I can, and stay out of the way. I'm not rich by any means, but I've done well for myself over the last few years, quietly. Built up a freelance business, lived modestly, and saved like my life depended on it. So, when my younger brother Ryan announced he was getting married, I thought, okay, time to show up for family. I didn't expect to be celebrated or even particularly appreciated, but I never expected to be treated like some unwanted afterthought either. The thing about Ryan is he's always been the golden child. Growing up, he got away with everything, from sneaking out to wrecking my dad's old car. Meanwhile, I was the one getting scolded for setting a bad example. When he dropped out of college for the second time, my parents still smiled proudly at him during dinner, while I, the one quietly paying off my student loans with 2 jobs, was asked if I could be more supportive. So, yeah, I'd long since accepted that family dynamics weren't exactly in my favor. Still, I thought a wedding might be a chance to reset things. I even offered to help cover a few costs when I heard money was tight. My offer was simple. I'd contribute a sizable gift, a $6,000 check. I never said it with an attitude or expected a parade. I just thought, they're family and weddings are expensive. It wasn't about showing off. I just wanted to feel like I mattered. The wedding was last Saturday. It took place at this sleek vineyard venue about an hour outside the city, big rolling hills, fairy lights strung across trees, a soft jazz band playing near the fountain. It was the kind of wedding you'd expect in a magazine spread. I arrived early, wearing a navy suit, freshly dry cleaned, and holding a neatly sealed envelope in my inside pocket. I even brought a small framed photo of our late grandmother to quietly leave at the reception table. She always said I had the soft heart of the family. When I got to the front desk to check the seating chart, that's when I felt the first slap of humiliation. My name wasn't printed on the elegant calligraphy list with the gold leaf accents. I thought maybe there was a mistake, so I asked one of the planners. Evan Taylor, she repeated, then walked over to a side table near the coat room. Ah, here you are. There it was. My name scribbled in black ballpoint pen on a cocktail napkin. No table number, just Evan, kids section. I blinked. I thought it was a placeholder, some clerical error. But when I followed the little handwritten arrow, it led to a small folding table shoved near the back wall, right by the exit to the kitchen. 4 kids were already seated, noisily dropping crayons into their juice cups. I actually stood there for a second, thinking, maybe this is a prank. Maybe Ryan's planning to come out laughing and tell me it's a joke. Instead, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was his new wife, Tessa. "Oh, hey," she said, like we were casual acquaintances at a networking event. "Glad you made it. We weren't sure you'd come." "Why would I not?" I asked, trying not to sound too stiff. She smiled in the practiced way people do when they don't actually care about your answer. "Well, you just seem like the kind of guy who keeps to himself. We figured you'd be fine with something low maintenance." I didn't even know how to respond to that. "You put me at the kids' table," I said. Her smile didn't flinch. "It was last minute. You weren't in the original plan." I felt something twist in my chest, not in a dramatic way, just this slow, hollow burn. Like when you realize your place in someone's life is much smaller than you thought. I didn't say anything right then. I just nodded, walked toward the table and sat down, trying to ignore the child next to me who immediately spilled applesauce on my pants. I hadn't even taken a sip of my drink before I noticed something even more bizarre. My gift envelope was sitting on the gifts table, already opened. The seal was torn, the flap hanging loose. The check I'd written with congratulations, Ryan and Tessa in the memo line was gone. Just gone. I turned around, scanning for someone, anyone, who might have answers. That's when I saw her again, Tessa, chatting with her bridesmaids, drink in hand, laughing. She glanced my way once, then quickly looked back, as if she'd seen a waiter, not a guest. I walked over calmly, envelope in hand. "Hey," I said quietly. She turned and raised her eyebrows. "Yes? I think there's been a mistake. This was already opened." She blinked, then tilted her head like I was the one being strange. "Oh yeah. We had to sort the gifts early. Ryan's mom was organizing them. I think it was just easier." "You opened a check for both of you?" "Well, I mean, it's not like we cashed it." That pause, that hesitation, that's what made my stomach clench. I looked down at the empty envelope, then back at her. "Then you won't mind if I take this back?" Her smile disappeared like someone flipped a switch. "Wait, you're serious?" I didn't answer. I just folded the envelope once, slipped it back into my inside pocket, and turned around. Behind me, I heard her mutter something to one of her bridesmaids. I didn't catch the words, but the tone, sharp, mocking, was all too familiar. I felt the burn creep up my neck. I wanted to tell myself I didn't care, that it didn't matter what these people thought of me. But it did, because I wasn't just a name scribbled on a napkin. I was the guy who dropped $6,000 with no expectations, who showed up early, who brought a picture of grandma, who wore a suit even though I hate suits, who got seated next to a sippy cup. And suddenly, I was the villain for not playing along. I made my way outside, needing a second to breathe. I stood by the edge of the vineyard, watching the guests filter in, snapping photos and giggling. Somewhere behind me, the jazz band had shifted to a Frank Sinatra cover. The whole event was perfect, picture perfect, except I didn't belong in the picture. That was the moment the gears started turning in my head. I hadn't even reached the halfway point of this evening, and I already knew I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. And neither were they. So I stood there at the edge of the venue, still holding that torn envelope, staring out at the rolling hills, like I was in some kind of cheesy soap opera. Only this wasn't fiction. This was me, Evan, getting treated like an afterthought by people who hadn't earned the right to smile at my generosity, let alone mock it. I didn't go back inside right away. I let the soft murmur of the crowd and the clinking of glasses drift over me. I could hear bits and pieces of conversation, someone complaining about the hors d'oeuvres being too artsy, a distant laugh from my aunt with that shrill pitch I always hated as a kid. They were all playing their part in Ryan and Tessa's perfect day. And me? I was supposed to sit at the back with a bunch of sugar-rush toddlers, pretending I wasn't quietly seething. A few minutes passed before someone else found me. My cousin Jordan, probably the only person in the family I still had any warmth for, walked up, loosened his tie, and handed me a drink. "Just take this," he said. "You look like you're planning someone's murder." I cracked a weak smile. Not murder, just quiet reevaluation. He looked down at my hand and saw the envelope. "Wait, did they seriously open it already?" I nodded slowly. "And stuck you at the kids' table?" I nodded again. He let out a low whistle. "Damn, they really went all out, huh?" Jordan didn't try to defend them. That's why I liked him. He didn't hit me with the classic "it's their big day, maybe cut them some slack" or some half-baked excuse about limited seating. He just stood there beside me, sipping his drink and letting the silence speak for itself. That's when he said something that stuck with me. "You know," he said, "they wouldn't treat you like this if they didn't think you'd take it." I turned and looked at him. "What?" He shrugged. "You're the nice one, the one who always shows up and never makes a fuss. People like that are easy to ignore until they stop playing along." That thought sat with me for a long time. We watched the ceremony from a distance. I didn't sit with the family. I stood by a tree just off the path, out of frame, watching Ryan nervously tug at his cuffs and Tessa grin like she just won the lottery. The whole time I kept thinking about what Jordan said, about how being silent had become my brand, about how low expectations had become a permission slip for disrespect. After the vows and the applause, everyone moved toward the reception tent. Fairy lights twinkled overhead, and the DJ was already setting up for the first dance. I wasn't in the mood for speeches or toasts. I wasn't even hungry anymore. I just wanted one thing, to make sure they knew I wasn't stupid and I wasn't soft. But I wasn't going to make a scene. No, I wasn't going to stoop to yelling across the dance floor or making some dramatic announcement. That's not my style. I do things clean, quiet, calculated. So I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my contacts and found the number, Adam, bank representative. What Ryan and Tessa didn't know, what no one in the family knew, was that the check I gave them wasn't just a generous wedding gift. It was also a test to see how they handled something valuable when they thought no one was watching. I'd already told Adam to issue a stop payment if anything weird happened. And this qualified. I stepped away from the crowd and hit call. Adam picked up on the second ring. "Evan, everything okay?" "Yep," I said calmly. "Remember that check we talked about, the wedding one?" "Yeah, go ahead and kill it." There was a pause. "You sure?" It was a big one, completely. He didn't ask why, he didn't need to. "Done," he said. "You'll get the confirmation email in a sec." I hung up and slipped the phone back into my pocket just as Ryan walked by, holding a glass of champagne and nodding at guests like he was some local politician. He hadn't even spoken to me yet, not once since I arrived. No handshake, no hug, no "hey, thanks for coming." Just a subtle shoulder check as he passed, like I was part of the scenery. I watched him laugh with a group of friends from his gym, guys who probably didn't even know my name. And I thought about all the times I'd covered his share of the rent when we were younger, all the times I'd picked him up from a party because he was too drunk to drive, all the times I bit my tongue when mom and dad bent over backward for him and left me to figure things out on my own. Yeah, I was done playing along. Dinner was served. I returned to my napkin seat long enough to pick at a plate of lukewarm chicken, while a 6-year-old beside me wiped his nose with the tablecloth. No one from the main family table came over. No toast mentioned me. No thank you. I might as well have been a waiter. When the dancing started and the DJ called out, "Let's get the whole family on the floor," I stood up, walked over to the gift table, and quietly removed my framed photo of Grandma. I tucked it under my arm and walked outside without saying a word. I didn't get far before I heard the first shout behind me. It was Tessa. "Wait, Evan, what are you doing?" I stopped but didn't turn. "You can't just take stuff from the gift table." I turned slowly and raised the frame in my hand. "This belonged to me." She blinked, confused. "Oh, well, okay, but still, you're acting weird. Did something happen?" I tilted my head just slightly. "You tell me." Her expression shifted just enough to show she knew exactly what I meant. Then she tried to fake laugh her way through it. "Come on, don't be sensitive. The table thing was just logistics. And your gift was so generous, we already deposited it." "No," I said quietly, cutting her off. "You didn't." She blinked. "What?" I canceled it. Her smile collapsed into something small and twitchy. "Wait, you're serious?" I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "I was never in the plan, remember? Just being low maintenance." And then I walked back to my car as the fairy lights glowed behind me. And the music played on, leaving her standing there, holding nothing. But the real fallout? That was still to come, because the check wasn't the only thing I'd quietly withdrawn from their lives, and they were about to find out just how much they'd been leaning on me without ever realizing it. I didn't rush home. I drove slow, windows down, letting the wind cool the heat that had been simmering in my chest all evening. There was something oddly calming about pulling away from the glow of that vineyard wedding, knowing I'd taken back more than just a check. I'd taken back control. For years, I'd let them treat me like background noise, the one they could always rely on as long as I stayed quiet, stayed useful, and stayed out of the spotlight. But something had shifted, something final. It wasn't about the $6,000. It was about realizing just how little they thought of me. Not just Ryan and Tessa, but everyone, the way my parents didn't even call to ask if I'd gotten there, the way no one noticed I was, seated with the kids, the way I'd been handed that envelope like it was just expected I'd give and never say enough. The next morning, I woke up to a flurry of texts. Most were from extended relatives in the group chat Ryan had set up for the wedding, a few congratulatory posts, some blurry dance floor selfies, and one message in particular that made me sit up straight. "Tessa, hi everyone. Just a heads up, there seems to have been a technical issue with one of the wedding checks. Not sure what happened, but we're sorting it out. Thanks again to everyone for being so generous." Right beneath it was a message from my Aunt Carol. Wait, the one from Evan? Followed by Uncle Paul. Didn't he give like $5,000 or something? That's a rough error. "Tessa, we'll figure it out. No big deal." I didn't reply. I just watched as the conversation veered into cake flavors and DJ playlists, but my phone kept buzzing. Around noon, Ryan finally texted me directly. "Hey, Tessa said you pulled the check. Is that true?" "No hi. No thanks for coming. Just straight to the money." I ignored it. "An hour later, can you call me then? Seriously, man. We've already made plans based on that." I tossed my phone on the table and let it vibrate itself into silence. Because here's what they didn't realize. That check was just one small part of what I'd been supporting. See, when our parents retired, they didn't exactly land on a pile of savings. They downsized, bought a smaller place, and Ryan moved into a downtown apartment. With rent that, I later learned, was well beyond what he could afford. That's when he called me, voice sheepish, saying he was just a little short and needed help getting approved for the lease. So I co-signed, and I'd been quietly covering half his rent ever since. At first it was just to get him on his feet. Just 3 months, he'd said. Then 3 turned into 6, then into a year, and I let it slide because I didn't want to be the older brother who said no. I thought I was helping him grow. No, I was done. I pulled up the property manager's website and submitted the cosigner removal form, attached, the rental statements, the updated credit history, and my own written request. Since I was the one paying most of it, the process was quick. They didn't even question me. Within 48 hours, Ryan would receive a notification that the rent was now his alone. And I wasn't stopping there. There were smaller things too. Things he probably never thought twice about. The streaming services on my account that he used, the Spotify family plan, the car insurance we were still bundled under, even our shared Costco membership. Bit by bit, I started peeling back every thread that connected me to his lifestyle. And the entire time, I didn't say a word. That silence, it was new for me. But this time, it wasn't weakness. It was surgical, precise. By Monday, my phone was full of unread messages. Ryan again, dude, rent bounced. What's going on? Then, I just got an email saying the lease is under review. Did you take your name off? Then Tessa, this is getting a little petty, don't you think? The check was a misunderstanding. You're making this a huge thing for no reason. No reason. It was that sentence that hit me hardest. Not we're sorry, not we didn't mean to hurt you. Just a passive-aggressive nudge suggesting that my entire existence had been an overreaction. I didn't respond. I just forwarded their messages to a folder I labeled closure, but I knew it wasn't over. Tuesday morning, I got a call from my mom. I didn't answer. She called again, then again. Finally, I picked up on the fourth ring, mostly out of curiosity. Evan, she said, her voice sharp with concern. What is going on? I stayed silent. Ryan just called us in a panic, she continued. He said you're pulling financial support. What happened at the wedding? What happened, I said calmly, was you raised 2 sons, and only one of them ever learned how to stand on his own. She paused. Evan, that's cruel. You know Ryan has had a hard time, and Tessa was probably just nervous hosting all those people. I'm sure she didn't mean to offend you. She scribbled my name on a napkin and sat me with a 6-year-old, I said flatly. And she opened my gift before I even arrived. Still, my mom said, her voice tightening. Don't you think you're being a bit extreme? Ryan is your brother, and I've been his wallet for the last 3 years, I said. He didn't even say thank you. Not once. There was another long pause. I just wish you wouldn't make things harder than they need to be. I let out a dry laugh. You mean like not being the guy who pays for everything in the background, while getting treated like a ghost at my own brother's wedding? Evan, she said. But her voice was softer now, less indignant. I didn't know any of that. You didn't ask, I interrupted. None of you ever asked. She didn't speak again. I could hear the silence stretching between us like a fraying wire. Eventually, I said, I'm not doing this anymore, Mom. Not the quiet support, not the guilt trips. I didn't go nuclear. I just stopped helping. I understand, she whispered. Whether she meant it or not, I couldn't tell. When I hung up, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel victorious either. I just felt clear, like I'd finally taken the weight off a part of me that had been sagging for years. But that clarity, it wouldn't last long because 2 days later, Tessa showed up at my office, uninvited. And her expression said everything. She wasn't here to apologize. She was here to fix me. She walked into the lobby of my office building like she owned the place, heels clicking against the tile, hair perfectly styled, a blazer that probably cost half my old monthly rent. The receptionist, Lacey, looked over at me wide-eyed and mouthed, "Is that her?" I just nodded once and stood up. "Mr. Taylor," Tessa said, voice too sweet for a woman who days ago had grinned, while sticking me next to a pack of toddlers like I was the entertainment. "Do you have a second?" I led her into the small conference room we sometimes used for client meetings. Glass walls, no privacy, but that was fine. I had nothing to hide. She sat down across from me, resting her expensive-looking purse on the table like it was made of glass. "First of all," she said, "I just want to clear the air. I think this whole thing got out of hand, and I'd like to resolve it for everyone's sake." I stayed quiet, just folded my arms and waited. She smiled like a kindergarten teacher explaining sharing to a stubborn child. "I think we both know that you're hurt. I get that the seating arrangement wasn't ideal, but weddings are complicated, and sometimes things fall through the cracks. You weren't forgotten. You were just late in the planning process." I leaned forward slightly. "You put my name on a napkin, Tessa." She didn't flinch. It was an honest mistake, and you opened my gift before the wedding started. "That was your mother's idea," she snapped. "She wanted to make sure everything was organized. Don't put that on me." "Oh, so it's her fault now?" Tessa's tone shifted just slightly. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here because Ryan is stressed out of his mind." Rent bounced. Creditors are calling. His insurance lapsed. It's like you've yanked the rug out from under him with no warning. "I gave him years of warning," I said. "You just didn't take it seriously." Her eyes narrowed. "You're punishing him for being the favorite son. That's what this is really about." I blinked at her slowly. "Punishing him?" I echoed. "You and I must live in very different realities. "Oh, come on, Evan," she said, crossing her legs and exhaling hard. "You don't need that money. You live alone, no kids, no spouse. You work remotely. You don't even have a mortgage. What exactly are you doing with all that cash? Saving it just to prove a point?" And there it was. The mask slipped, just for a second. That entitled tilt to the chin, that cold calculation in her tone. It wasn't about fixing things, it was about control. I gave a slow, humorless chuckle. "You think I owe you? That I'm some background donor in your picture-perfect life? That because I'm quiet, because I don't complain, I'm your financial plan? That I'm the fallback guy when Ryan overextends and your Instagram aesthetic needs maintaining?" Her smile faltered. I kept going. "You opened my gift before I even walked into the wedding. You placed me next to a child who blew his nose into the tablecloth. You didn't speak to me once all night unless it was about money. And now, because your safety net has a spine, you show up in my office trying to spin it as a misunderstanding." Tessa stared at me. For once, she didn't have a comeback. "You married Ryan," I said, voice steady. "Which means you married his debts, his habits, and his entitlement. Good luck with that. But I'm done funding it. I'm not your low-maintenance donor. I'm your brother-in-law, and now I'm just a ghost." She stood, slow and deliberate. "You'll regret this." I tilted my head. "Only if I forget why I started." She left without another word. The fallout came quickly. Ryan called me later that night. No more passive-aggressive texts. This time it was raw, angry. "You humiliated me," he shouted into the phone. "You ambushed us. You made me look like a fool in front of our entire family." "I didn't make you do anything," I replied calmly. "You did that to yourself. All I did was stop letting you use me." "We're brothers, Evan," he snapped. "You think family just cuts each other off because of one bad night?" I paused. It wasn't one night. It was years of being invisible until you needed something. Years of being the guy who cleaned up your messes, co-signed your leases, funded your lifestyle. And the first time I needed a seat at the table, you gave me a napkin. "You're overreacting." "No," I said. "I'm reacting appropriately for the first time in my life." He hung up. I expected blowback from the family. I braced myself for it, and it came in waves. My dad called to say I was being dramatic. My mom begged me to apologize and be the bigger person. Even my uncle chimed in with a long-winded voicemail about how family should move past grudges and misunderstandings. But none of them asked me how I felt. Not once. No one said, "Are you okay?" or "Did that hurt you?" or even, "We're sorry we didn't notice." It was always "Fix this," or "Let it go," or "Don't destroy the family over money." So I sent one message, one group text. "This isn't about money. It's about respect. I've been giving and giving for years, and I finally realized I was only ever appreciated for what I could offer, not who I am. I'm stepping back, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. I wish you all well, but I'm done being the ghost at your table." And then I left the group, blocked a few numbers, silenced the rest. For the first few days it was hard. Silence feels heavy when you're used to being the quiet supporter in a loud room. But slowly, something started to shift. I felt lighter. I started sleeping better. My work improved. I reconnected with old friends. I even took a weekend trip to the mountains, something I'd always put off because there was always someone in the family who needed me more. Weeks passed, then a month, and slowly the noise faded. No more calls, no more guilt trips, no more napkin placements. Then one day, Jordan texted me out of the blue. "Guess who's selling their designer couch on Facebook Marketplace?" I laughed out loud. And it wasn't bitter. It wasn't smug. It was just freeing. I never went back to that family dynamic. I never resumed the payments. I never attended another holiday where I was just the background ATM. And I never again let myself be treated like I didn't belong, especially not by people who only noticed me when my wallet showed up before I did. Because here's what I learned. Respect isn't something you earn by being quiet and helpful. It's something you demand by walking away when it's denied. And sometimes the cleanest revenge isn't loud. It's the sound of a check canceling, the silence after a ghost finally speaks, and the echo of a napkin being torn in half.